أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغه مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قال ستجدني إن شاء الله صابرا ولا أعصي لك أمرا قال فإن اتبعتني فلا تسألني عن شيء حتى أحدث لك منه ذكرا فانطلقا حتى إذا ركبا في السفينة خرقها قال أخرقتها لتغرق أهلها لقد جئت شيئا إمرا قال ألم أقل لك إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا قال فلا تؤاخذني بما نسيت ولا ترهقني من أمري عسرا صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات اللهم صل على محمد. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, a second loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Yesterday we continued with the story of Musa and Khidhr alayhi salam, and we mentioned in the story of Musa and Khidhr a number of lessons that can be learnt from the way Musa deals with different situations and the way that Khidhr is going to be dealing with different situations. And of those lessons was a lesson that Musa alayhi salam, the moment he found out there was some sort of knowledge that he was not privy to and that he had not already gained, he made a commitment that he would not stop on this journey of seeking this knowledge. Either he would find that thing that is lost for him, that knowledge that he doesn't have access to, or he would walk on this journey for many, many years. And this was a very important lesson for us because the status of knowledge and the significance of knowledge within the Muslim community is something that historically has gone through a major and severe decline. Shaheed Mutahari, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless his soul, writes in his books of one of the reasons why the Muslim ummah had a major decline from its power and might one day immediately following the demise of the Prophet or the martyrdom of the Prophet, all the way up until today. The reasons that he mentions, one of them is that the Muslim ummah went from being an ummah that seeked knowledge and gained knowledge to becoming an ummah that only respected those who already had knowledge. And hence he says you find those who would kiss the hands of the scholar, but they themselves would not bother to learn from the knowledge that this scholar has. And therefore this became one of the main reasons of the decline of the Muslim ummah. And the many other lessons that we covered yesterday. We ended our discussion here where Musa alayhi salam is now going to accompany Khidhr, and now he's going to begin on this journey. And inshallah tonight, in order to continue with this discussion, we will go through and answer the following questions. Number one of those questions, what was the difference? Yes, the first of those questions, what lesson do we learn from the manners that Musa employed when he began to speak to his teacher? and his master Khidhr. Did he approach Khidhr and tell him, listen, I know you have a knowledge, I'm joining you to learn this knowledge? Or was there a very particular way he approached the scholar of his own time and the teacher of his own time? Number two, what do we learn from the fact that Khidhr makes it clear from the very beginning that, oh Musa, if you're going to join me, you will not be able to be patient with the many things that you will witness me doing. Number three, how does our perspective on the reality of this world change the moment we leave this world and the moment we enter into the akhirah? And how much better do we understand the reality of this world the moment that we die? Number four, what are the three actions that Khidhr will do that will raise the eyebrows of Musa and will raise objection in the eyes of Musa alayhi salam? And how do they tie in very beautifully to the different aspects and chapters of the life of Musa alayhi salam himself? And what was the wisdom in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tying these events to the events of the life of Musa alayhi salam? And number five, what lesson do we learn from the forgiveness and the grace with which Khidhr deals with Musa after Musa breaks his promise of not objecting to the different things that he's going to be doing? Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into these 5 questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Musa and Yusha now find this special teacher Khidhr. And Musa wants to now make this suggestion to Khidhr that now I want to join you. They found that lost person of theirs and now they want to go on this journey on him. Now when they want to join him on this journey, Musa is very careful in the terminology that he uses and the way he brings up the suggestion. Why is this? Because he knows he's dealing with a person of knowledge. So when he approaches this person of knowledge, he doesn't come to Khidhr and say, listen, you have a certain type of knowledge, well, I need that knowledge and now I'm going to be coming with you. It's not a done deal. Musa approaches Khidhr with a lot of humility. Why? Because he has to approach him from an angle of a person who's ignorant and a person who has knowledge. A person who has knowledge automatically in this realm and in this world has a higher status, whatever that knowledge might be. Sometimes it's religious knowledge, sometimes it's not even religious knowledge. Whatever the case might be, he has a status that the student does not have. And Musa understands this humility. When he approaches his own scholar, what does he say? Does he say, Khidhr, hurry up, tell me the stuff you know, I don't have too much time? Or did he come and say, هل أتبعك? Do I have permission to please join you, to please shadow you? على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا, so that you can teach me from some of the stuff that you know, hopefully I can learn in the process. This humility is the first step in learning. This is why the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt tell us that the one who can't say La Adri, the one who cannot say I don't know, he will never grow in his life. He will never learn in his life. This is why the first Imam, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says, no one will ever rise to the might of knowledge, to the power of knowledge, until he humbles himself with the humility of not knowing. He has to first recognize with his own humility, I don't know, I don't have knowledge. When I'm approaching the situation, I have to approach it with humility. I'm not the one in charge here. He has this knowledge, even though he's a prophet of God himself. When he approached Khidhr, he said, do I have permission? And in the narrations, you find that when you approach someone who has knowledge, a scholar, this is the way you're supposed to approach them. You don't just come up to them and say, okay, hurry up, do your thing. No. Say, do I have permission to please benefit? Now, when I say a scholar, I want a big disclaimer here, yes? When we say these scholars, especially in the history of Islam, they're not talking about someone like myself, okay? They're talking about these great scholars. These scholars who spent their whole life sometimes going through different manuscripts to find out whether the wording of the hadith is this or that, for example. Hours they had to spend on this stuff. Yesterday, I was combing through Bihar al-Anwar just to put together some of the narrations on the story of Khidhr. I picked up the book in my library. Yes, my wife looked at the book and said, wow, this is such a thick book. 120 volumes based on the old prints, yes? 120 volumes. And for a moment, we just marveled at how much time and effort had to go into a scholar coming and combing through every single one of these narrations. Now, Allama Majlisi had his own approach, and his approach has a separate discussion. But nonetheless, he had to sit down and go through all of these. It was so much, the work is so heavy, that he had to get other students of his to join him in this process. Bihar al-Anwar was not even put together only by Allama Majlisi. He had students who would go through it, and then he would approve the final product that he would go through. How much effort went through the time and the effort and the days and the energy of these scholars for us to be able to sit here and say Musa did this and Khidhr did this? The difficulty it takes for a scholar to reach a level of knowledge, Islam tells you and I, when you approach that scholar, you're supposed to acknowledge the difficulty that they went through. That difficulty they went through, it shows itself in the respect that you show. So Ayatollah Sistani says, for example, when you're traveling this many times, in this many months, you're going to pray qasr. So you say, okay, that's easy. Ayatollah Sistani, it really took you this long to figure out something this simple? He says, well, come, let me show you the difficulty I had to go through to be able to come up with something like this. I had to put together 100 pieces of the puzzle for me to be able to understand this. Then when you learn the difficulty he's gone through, then that brings you humility. Now when you sit in front of Ayatollah Sistani, you don't say, oh, why is your ruling like this? You don't approach it like that anymore. You approach it with humility. You say, oh Ayatollah, oh Shaykh, or scholar, whatever the case might be, can you shed light for us on some of this knowledge that you have gained and how you reach this opinion of yours? The one who comes and doesn't show humility, quite often it's because he doesn't even understand the difficulty that that scholar had to go through to be able to produce that work. In Islam, the work of a scholar is considered valuable. That respect that you show is a way to show your appreciation for the work of that scholar. Those great scholars, the Allama Tabatabais of the world and Allama Majlisis of the world and all of them. Yani people call us scholars too. It's an embarrassment and we're ashamed to even have these titles for us, yes? But these great scholars of ours, Musa comes, he says, Hal attabi'uka. Do I have permission to please join you so that you can teach me mimma ullimta rushda, a little bit of the things you've learned? This is the level of humility that Musa is showing to Khidhr. He puts this request in front of Khidhr. Khidhr, of course, immediately turns around and says what? He says, Musa, innaka lan tastati'a ma'aya sabra. I don't think so, because you're not going to be patient with the things you're going to witness today. This must have been a shock for Musa, because he's a prophet of God. He's not expecting this response. He should have been expecting a response of maybe, let's see, so on and so forth. Khidhr is putting an end to the discussion immediately. Before anything started, he's already ending the story. He's saying, you don't have patience. Okay, so why is it that Khidhr is so easily turning around to Musa, saying, you don't have the patience to stay with me? The reason why is because Khidhr knows. He knows that he's looking at things from an angle that Musa is not looking at those same things from the same angle. He knows that Musa is looking at things from a different angle compared to him. Because he knows he has a different angle, he knows he's not going to be able to be patient with what's happening. You don't see it from the place I see it. And this is exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you and I. Wa alaikum assalam. The difficulties that you and I go through in this world and the promises that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes about the akhirah, how many times does the Quran tell us these things? When you come over there, it's going to be different. This good deed that you did is going to turn into a blessing. We don't understand. Why? Because we don't have that perspective. Perspective changes everything in life. You know when that perspective changes? That perspective changes the moment this human being leaves this world. When he leaves this world, then he has a different perspective on life. Then he sits back and he says, oh, so when they used to say this bad deed has these consequences, this is what they were talking about. The moment he leaves this world, he says, oh, when they used to say, every dhikr I do of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it has this many blessings and this many mansions in heaven for me. This is what they were talking about. Why? Because his perspective has changed now. That's why the first Imam, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, he has a beautiful line. It's a legendary line. He says, An-nas niyamun, people are asleep. Idha matu, when they die, they wake up. The moment he dies, then he says, oh, this is what they were telling us about. And to the level that you and I have that realization, before we die, is how much maturity we have and how much we can prepare for our akhirah. Some people understand the realities of this world before they die. Those are the ones who prepare for the next world. And then there are those they don't understand. They only understand when they go to the grave, or they might understand on the day of judgment. This is why the Quran says, when we resurrect them on the day of judgment, and now they are coming into the mahshar. Everyone is gathering. What do they say? قَالُوا يَا وَيْلَنَا. We are in trouble. مَنْ بَعَثَنَا مِنْ مَرْقَدِنَا. Who raised us from our place of sleep, in our place of residence? هَذَا مَا وَعَدَ الرَّحْمَنِ. This is what our Lord kept telling us about. This is that thing He kept saying. Because now they have a different perspective. They're looking at things from a very different angle. وَصَدَقَ الْمُرْسَلُونَ. You know, those prophets of God used to come and tell us all of this stuff. They were right. But at that point it's too late. So on the bad side, people realize the reality of their bad deeds on that day of judgment because they have a different perspective now. Also a moment of realization for the good people. Now this good person comes, the angels have gathered him, the angels come to him. The angels say, Salamun alaykum, welcome. Udkhuluha, why don't you go and enter into heaven? In some verses it says, ذَلِكَ يَوْمُ الْخُلُودِ. This is now the time you go into this heaven, you can live here forever. He has a moment of realization. This is what they were talking about when they used to tell me, if I pray, if I fast, if I take care of my dress code, if I give charity, whatever it is, there's more reward than I can even imagine. Because now he has a different perspective on things. Khidhr told Musa, إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ. You're not going to be able to do this. Why, Khidhr? Why are you so sure? Because he's not looking at things from the same perspective that I'm looking at things. He doesn't have that angle that I'm looking at things. So then he moved on. He said, and this is now the compassion of Khidhr. This is the beautiful patience of a mentor. And there's an important lesson in this for all of us, especially the parents. He said, وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِتْ بِهِ خُبْرًا. How can you be patient when you don't know what's happening behind the scenes? You don't have that knowledge. I have that knowledge. When I see things happening, I can be patient with them. I know exactly what's happening. How can you be patient when you don't know the wisdom behind things? This is one of the first principles of mentorship. One of the first principles of mentorship is for you to understand where your mentee is at, what his level is at. You have to meet him where he is. Khidhr doesn't walk in here and say, listen, I told you, don't object to stuff. You should know better. I'm that special servant of God. You should just listen to me. That's not what Khidhr said, because Khidhr is mentoring Musa. The first principle of being a mentor is understanding that your student is not where you're at. You're at this level, your student is at this level. Now, take that and apply it to our own lives. You are at this level, your child is at this level. You can't expect your child, oh, I already told him once. I told you before, so why don't you just go ahead and do this? Don't you know this? No, وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ. How can he understand when he doesn't have that knowledge that you have? You have experience, you have maturity, you've grown up in life, you've gone through so many things. Of course you're going to understand it better than him. He's not going to understand it. So you'll find in the story of Khidhr, even when Musa breaks his promise, Khidhr is very patient because he understands where his mentee is at in terms of his level. He doesn't sit there and say, oh, you should know this. You don't know this? I mean, I already told. He doesn't do any of that. But what do parents do? Parents, spouses, they don't understand where the other person is at in terms of their understanding. So I already told you this, we already discussed this before. That's not how mentorship happens. Mentorship happens with you understanding where your audience is at, where the other person is at. And same thing with that person has to do with you. So I sometimes have to mentor my spouse, and then my spouse in certain areas where I struggle has to mentor me. I have to show patience when she is at a certain level in a certain area. She has to show the patience of Khidhr when it comes to the weaknesses that I have. She has to sit there and say, yes, I know this one's difficult for you. It's not clicking for you fully. That's okay. Slowly, you can grow into this level of maturity, is what Khidhr is saying. He said, وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ? How can I expect for you to be able to understand and be patient with all of this? مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا. You don't have this knowledge. So your child does not have the knowledge that you have. You keep sitting there and saying, oh, you should pray, and then he doesn't pray, and then you lose it. But you have to understand his level of maturity, and you should continue to tell him, but you should never lose your cool with him. Because if you understand where he's at in life, then you say, yeah, I have to play my role, and I have to be patient with him. Just like Khidhr, you'll see, is very patient with Musa, even though technically what Musa does, based on these standards, he technically breaks his promise. Technically, Musa breaks his promise, as you will see. He said, وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا. How can you be patient? You don't have that knowledge. So Musa doesn't want to lose out on this opportunity. He turned around and said, listen, قَالَ سَتَجِدُنِي. Listen, I promise. Insha'Allahu sabra. If God wills, because Musa doesn't rely on himself too much, yes? He's still relying on God. He said, if God gives me the ability, you'll find me very patient. ستجدني إن شاء الله صابرا ولا أعصي لك أمرا. And whatever you tell me to do, I'm not going to stop you. Now Musa, one of these two promises, he broke. Why? Because the first promise was, I'm not going to question you. I'm not going to do all of this. But did he end up questioning Khidhr? He did end up questioning Khidhr. So we'll have to see how Khidhr deals with Musa breaking his promise. وَلَا أَعْصِي لَكَ أَمْرًا. I will not stop you from doing the things you're doing. This one he kept, because at the end of the day, every time he allowed Khidhr to do what he was doing. Okay, so now they're going to begin on this journey, and they're going to head out. The first of those tests is going to pop up. There's 3 actions Khidhr is going to do. 2 of them are very questionable. Very questionable. And you can point to them and say they're evil. Except the whole point of the story is, once you understand the wisdom, then you understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best what He's doing. The first of those actions is that Khidhr and Musa are going to go into a ship, and he's going to poke a hole in this ship. Which means it's the end of that ship. The whole point of the ship is not to get water in. Once you get water in, that ship is sinking. This is number 1 he's going to do. Number 2, he's going to come across a young man, and he's going to take the life of that young man. These are evil things. That's number 2. Number 3, they're going to go to a place. In that place, there's a number of people who are living there. They're going to ask them for food. These guys are going to say no to them. And then Khidhr finds a wall that's about to fall. And even though the people of the city or the village showed very little kindness to Khidhr, he's going to go out of his way to fix that wall. It's a very odd action of Khidhr. Okay, every one of these, Musa of course is going to object to them. The first 2, because it seems evil to him, of course he has to object to them. Because what do you mean you're going to take the life of a person? This is absolutely, evil. The first 2 make sense. The third one, you'll find Musa will at least raise questions. Now, why are we doing this? These guys didn't even take care of us. Why are you fixing this wall and going out of your way and all? This doesn't seem wise. All 3 Musa is going to raise questions. In Ilal al-Shara'i, Shaykh al-Saduq's book, he narrates a very beautiful narration. The narration of the Imam says, Musa, in all 3 of these actions that were taking place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose these 3 because these 3 actions tied in with the different chapters of the life of Musa alayhi salam himself. And it was God's way of reminding Musa of all of his blessings and how many times he saved Musa when he was in difficult situations. So the first of those actions was what? The first of those actions is, of course, Khidr is going to go in the ship, poke a hole in this ship. It's going to sink if it remains on this water. The narration says this was to remind Musa of that time when his mother took him and put him in the water. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with His own mercy and grace, saved the life of Musa alayhi salam. This is to remind Musa of all of the blessings we've sent him. The Quran also talks about this, that, O Musa, remember that time. وَلَقَدْ مَنَنَّا عَلَيْكَ مَرَّةً أُخْرَى. Remember the time we kept blessing you, and then we gave you Harun, and then we saved your life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does this very frequently with His prophets, reminding them of their blessings. This is number one. Number two, the next of those things that Khidr will do was that he will come, he'll take the life of this young person, yes? This is to remind Musa of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved him when he accidentally took the life of that Canaani individual who was fighting with the Israelites. That essentially led to his expulsion from the city, and Musa had to flee from the city because the people of the Pharaoh were now after him. This is a reminder of that. And number three, when this wall is going to be fixed, even though technically it's a wall that should not be fixed, and it's a wall that's going to be falling down, now Khidr is going to come and fix this wall even though there's no one to appreciate his work. The people of that village, they show no kindness to Musa. This is to remind Musa of that time where he came upon the well of Madian, as the Quran says. He had already left Egypt. He come upon the well of Madian. وَلَمَّا وَرَدَ مَاءَ مَدْيَنَ. All he saw were these women. They were trying to get water. The other men were not allowing them to get water. What did Musa do? He gave the water to them without any appreciation. And all the Quran says is, فَتَوَلَّى إِلَى الظِّلِّ. He went and found a shadow or a shade and said, قَالَ رَبِّ إِنِّي لِمَا أَنزَلْتَ إِلَيَّ مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَقِيرٌ. I need your help, Oh Allah. Then what happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened the doors of His blessings upon Musa. He found himself work, found himself a wife, found himself a life. All of that through what? Yes? All of that through this one thing that he did that at that moment no one appreciated. So Khidr's third action is what? Is an action that people will not appreciate, but at the same time he will do it because it's the right thing to do. All three of these tie in with the different chapters of the story of Musa alayhi salam. Okay, wonderful. Now Khidr is going to go approach the first situation. The first situation says, as they were close to the bodies of water, because the meeting point for Musa and Khidr was what? Majma'ul Bahrain. It was the place where the two bodies of water were going to meet. Because they were close to the water, at this point they go to ride a ship. And the narration says this ship was almost full, except the owner of the ship, you know what he said? He said, you know what? These three people, who are the three people? Musa, Khidr, and Yusha ibn Nun. Yes, all three of them together. These three people, they seem like qawmun salihun. They seem like a very good group of people. And it's very ironic because they don't know what Khidr is going to do on this ship. He said, these three people seem like a very good group of people. We should definitely take them with us. So they jump on this ship. They go on the journey. When the ship pulls to the corner, then all of a sudden Musa sees Khidr doing something very odd. He starts poking this hole and covering this hole. So the Quran says, حَتَّى إِذَا رَكِبَ فِي السَّفِينَةِ خَرَقَهَا. He poked a hole in it. And Musa turned back to him. قَالَ أَخَرَقْتَهَا لِتُغْرِقَ أَهْلَهَا. You're poking this hole so that these individuals all drown? لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا إِمْرًا. What a terrible thing you would do. The moment he said this, Khidr said what? قال ألم أقل لك إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا. Didn't I tell you you wouldn't be able to bear this? I know what I'm doing. My responsibility is different from your responsibility because these are all evil things. Musa should never do such a thing. But Khidr is working as God's special agent with his own wisdom in mind. So, he has his own way of doing things. In the movies, there's the normal police and then the agent that goes rogue. Yes? This is Khidr is going rogue. But he has direct commands. He knows exactly what he needs to do. Now Musa, with his normal police approach, is saying, oh my God, what's happening here? You're creating havoc. You're wreaking havoc, chaos. This is not supposed to happen. And Khidr says, listen, I told you, this is higher level of intelligence I'm talking about. You don't understand this. I need to be breaking this rule right now. But Musa cannot understand this. So then what happened? The moment he did this, Musa essentially yelled back at him. What did Khidr do? Khidr said, you know what? I'm done with this. I told you already. You didn't listen to me once. That's it. Or did Khidr show the patience that a mentor is supposed to show? Khidr said, I told you wouldn't be able to do this. So it's over now? No, patience. Because Khidr knows slowly. This is what parents need to do. Parents, they might have to repeat the same thing 50 times for their kids. But none of those 50 times are they supposed to lose their cool. None of those 50 times are they supposed to yell. None of those 50 times are they supposed to make this child's body shiver or shake. Never. But all of those 50 times, they have to be firm, and they have to be kind, and they have to repeat the same thing. Then I tell you, and I can only tell you because it happened with myself as a child, yes? This is just my promise from a personal perspective, yes? You'll see 10 years later, if you told that child over and over again and modeled for him beautifully in the house, and you were firm about this, all of a sudden you see 10 years later with his friends, he's doing what you used to tell him to do. Baba, why didn't you do this when you were in the house? Well, that's just the pain of raising children. They grow up, sometimes they do things, you're very proud of them. Like, why didn't you used to do this before so I don't have to kill myself like this? That's just the pain of raising children, yes? But say it. Continue to say it. Put your foot down. Be a father, be a mother. Say, this is a red line. We don't do this in our house. This is like this is like that. But do it kindly. Do it with patience. And you'll see, inshallah, in the future, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He blesses this family, all of a sudden this child, you see, oh, he does make up his room when he's moved on in life. In our house, he never used to do this. But now a little bit of responsibility has come his way. Oh, he's doing it. So what I used to say was seeping into his mind. It takes time. This is the mentorship of Khidr. So the moment Musa alayhi salam said this, Khidr did not turn him away. But there's something very beautiful because Musa is now going to make an excuse. He's going to explain how, oh Khidr, don't stop our journey here. I'm sorry. I want to continue to learn from you. There's still other things that are supposed to happen. Musa says this last line before they move on to the next chapter. Musa said, O Khidr, la tu'akhidni bima nasitu. Don't hold me accountable for the promise I forgot about. Wala turhiqni min amri usra. Don't make things difficult for me. Like, I still want to join you. It's beautiful. Musa says, nasitu, I forgot. It almost feels like Musa is such a firm believer in stopping people from doing evil in this world that when he saw the actions of Khidr, it's almost as if he forgot about his promise. See, Musa's faith is so strong, the moment he saw someone doing something wrong, especially at this level where the lives of others are going to be endangered, it's almost as if he forgot everything. Because he knows this is wrong. This is not supposed to be happening. And Musa, of course, is well known amongst the prophets as being the least political correct of the prophets. And Musa didn't really mess around, yes? He was very serious about everything. The moment he saw such a terrible thing happening, it's almost as if he couldn't bear it. He couldn't even take it. So I completely forgot about that. This is the beauty of the character of Musa and the clash of two different realms from which you see Musa is growing slowly. And Khidr, inshallah, is going to show his mentorship even more than before. With that, inshallah, we'll bring tonight's talk to an end. Let's take a moment to recite Surah Al-Fatiha for all of your marhumin and marhumat, especially the marhumin and marhumat of the sponsors of tonight's program, with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah.